and welcome to Mirador Television. We are the biggest little TV in the world, based in Lewes, East Sussex in England. Our aim is to entertain and to spice things up a little. We will also keep an eye on the local politics, because let's face it, someone has to. Our programs range from stories about the local people to stories about people from all the way across the pond. Brought to you by our wonderful colleagues in New York. So why not sit back, relax with your favourite cuppa, or maybe your favourite tipple, and enjoy. This is Mirador Television.
Good morning. Well, that weather forecast is not the weather forecast, don't worry. The weather today is going to be light cloud, sunny spells, and at the moment I can look out at my trusty tree and it says a light breeze, but there's nothing affecting the tree at all, and the sky is clear. So it's rather pleasant out there. So if you really want to get cracking, is these spectacles. I don't know why they get so dirty just before I'm ready to go and televise, but there we are. That's the way that it occurs, isn't it? So it's a lovely day out there, and a day to go and have a coffee in the precinct. And I'm not urging you to break the law, but just if you go and exercise and go and sit in the precinct, because yesterday we broadcast live from outside. It wasn't a total success because we had some internet connection problems, but nonetheless, we did it, and we now know what we're facing. And it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous in the precinct in Lewes, and the precinct is sort of a shopping area where people can gather, and there are chairs and seats and that sort of thing, and like a public square, I suppose. But the thing is that there was a little glimmer of hope in the air. And there's a gentleman down there, a company down there, two guys who bring in the most marvelous fruit, and they have it for sale from 7 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of people come and get their fresh fruit there, and it gave a sparkle to the day. So if you actually decide to go for a walk through the centre of Lewes today. Don't head off into the country, and get a feel for perhaps a rebirth, a reawakening. Now, Paul Fowle is with me this morning, and he's got some caveats to what I've just said. But then again, I'm the glass half full man, and he's the glass half empty. Normally, because he's actually nicked my glass and drunk what was left in the And I don't blame him either, because my choice of drink is always first class. Is it not, Paul?
Well, I've known you some time now, Keith, and I'm waiting for the second round. You bought the first round, but it's taken 2 years to get the second round. It's always a pleasure to meet you.
The funny thing is that not this last New Year's Eve, but the New Year's Eve just before we lockdown, you came over for a drink, and we had a drink, and we headed off to the John Harvey Tavern, I think. Yes. And it's funny how you remember things, because there is a very, very nice Indian restaurant. A lady is a great favorite with people in Lewis, called Chowder's. And we actually quite like sitting on the roof where you can get a cocktail on a summer's evening. It's very pleasant. But we went to the pub, and on the way back home, we passed, and some vandals had driven a car into Chowder's window, if you recall.
Yes, yes.
And that's it. That was New Year's Eve a year and a half ago, year and a quarter ago.
Right.
Anyway, I thought that those are the sort of memories that stick with you. I have to say that that's all been mended. She is just doing takeaway at the moment, but hopefully we're going to find that COVID is going to be eased a little bit. But the main headline this morning is that EU leaders to discuss boosting vaccine supplies. Now, that's the first time I've seen a positive headline about this, because mostly it's how EU leaders are actually going to stop the supplies of vaccine, and how they still are stirring it up about AstraZeneca. So I'm happy to see that that's the headline this morning. Pubs could ask to see vaccine passports. But I asked myself, Paul, is that any different to the thing that we have on the phone when you go in and you actually register the fact that you've been there? I mean, that's a sort of passport, is it not?
It's adding another layer, Keith, really, and surely if you have enough identification, etc. Otherwise, we're getting into overkill, aren't we, again, where you get a vaccine passport, you get a pub passport. Now, I'd love the pub passport part, because I can go on holiday with a pub passport.
Yeah.
But it is amazing. Yeah, we're in danger of, as I say, becoming an Orwellian world where everyone has to have about 3 passports. I'm sure that the basic getting in with identification is fine if certain places don't regulate properly. There may be a vaccine passport, but I guess it's more for a global thing, isn't it, Keith? Really, having a vaccine passport where
they say that pubs could ask to see a vaccine passport, and I suppose if you think about it, that makes a bit of sense, in as much as any places that we're going to go, if we're going to back any sort of normality, where you're likely to rub shoulders with your neighbour, as it were, is a pub. I mean, it's quite unique in as much as you go and stand at a bar and you have a chat to the bartender, the owner, the landlord, the people in the pub. There's nothing else. In no restaurants, you don't do that. You might see somebody at a table and wander over and say hello, but you don't actually gather together. So it would make sense to me that you have a pub passport to say, I am going to the pub, or I have been to the pub, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, it's not. Yeah, I think that's fair enough, as long as it doesn't get escalated, actually, Keith. But when everyone knows you, Keith, probably about 200 pubs know you, so they won't ask for your passport.
Oh, it's not that few.
Right.
I can see a row brewing now, because according to the BBC, NHS staff in Scotland have been offered a 4% pay rise, as opposed to the 1% here. Now that's a hell of a gap, and I can see that already the general public are not at all happy with the 1% for those people who put their
absolutely
they put their heads and hearts on the line during COVID and got 1%, and now in Scotland they're going to get 4%. It wouldn't surprise me if this wasn't a deliberate ploy on behalf of the Scottish government to boost independence, but there we go.
Well, I will argue differently, Keith. I'd argue that it's rather like them getting 4%, and that's being allowed by the UK government, I guess, means that actually we're helping Scotland, and the more the English look like they're helping Scotland, the more likely we'll stay together. So there's about 2 or 3 ways of looking at this. I'm sceptical.
Oh, yes, there are indeed.
Yeah, 1% is derisory, Keith. It's absolutely derisory. I'd probably go 10%. I think 10 to 15%. I believe that they should get a bonus on top of that, because some of them are probably working 48 hours, Keith. It's
right. So an increase plus a bonus is your solution.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think both. If you're an
not a bad
outstanding
solution.
Yeah, I think, yeah, but they must. Everybody who actually goes into the NHS and their hours are very long. Even those who just bring you a cup of tea to your bed. I think it's a wonderful institution that I think even the Russians and Chinese admire it. So we're doing something right anyway. People knock England, but Britain rather, but it is a fantastic service, and they deserve all the money they get.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Now, as you well know, and those people who know me well, there isn't an ism in my body that sometimes, because of the past and the era I lived through, I'll come out and I'll say something which people will say, "Oh, well, that's sexist" or whatever. So I'm going to be very careful what I say here. No, I'm not. Middle-aged women are the worst affected by the long COVID, by the long lockdown. It looks as if the sort of middle-aged ladies, I suppose, is what are we talking about? 50 to 70? Is that middle-aged? Or are we talking about 40 to 60? I don't know.
40 to 55, 60, yeah.
Yes. And I mean, I sort of understand that, because while women working and women taking their role in society, in equality with men and all the rest of it, which is an ism which I don't care about. I just want quality. I don't care whether they're male, female, or in between. What I really do worry about, though, is that there are certain biological things, sociological things that will affect us, whether you're a male or a female. And in this particular case, I would imagine that middle-aged ladies are the busiest of the lot, because while we are off doing other things, a lot of them are looking after children. They are making a home. They get heavily involved in charities and so on. So, see, I'm sounding an ism already, and I'm stereotyping, but I'm trying hard to understand and be sympathetic to why this particular age group would be affected worse than anybody else. And the other one that's in the headlines this morning is that stalking victims are what they call sitting ducks. In other words, if you're being stalked, it's very easy for the stalker during lockdown, because the police have got their hands full with people who are demonstrating and getting out of hand. So I understand that. And I have to say, Paul, that 2 or 3 times in the last 10 days or so, I walked through Lewes at about 10 o'clock at night. I've been out working, I may say, so don't start telling the police that I'm breaking COVID rules. And there is an uneasy feeling, because the streets are so quiet. That there is no comfort in thinking that there's somebody there that if you get jumped, you can say help and something's going to happen, because we have no coppers on the beat, and any citizen is long gone past bedtime or into lockdown. So I do understand that people are vulnerable who have to be out, and particularly if they are being stalked. I don't know that I've ever been stalked. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
But, can I come in here, Keith? Because actually, what it could amount to, of course, is burglars and criminals have to obey COVID as well. So a lot of them are actually staying indoors.
Yes, but then there has been a rash. I mean, the local news, or one of the local news, is that car windows have been smashed. The percentage is much higher now during lockdown. So there is somebody on the prowl doing something somewhere.
No, two answers to that, Keith, from my police days is, firstly, when you get that smashing, that's really just depression. It's probably a load of yobs who are just getting so fed up about being indoors, and they smash. It's always a trait I've noticed throughout the years, whether Birmingham or Brighton, the smashed windows. The old favourite when I was a policeman was getting the key. You get a key, go down a road with 100 cars and scrape each car. And the number of times in Hastings and Brighton that we dealt with that. So really, I mean, as I say, burglars have families, criminals have families. they're probably staying indoors, and the streets are quiet because people actually do seem to be obeying staying indoors. Plus, if you're a burglar, as we've said the other day, I think the funny side to this is, if you're a burglar, it's very difficult to find a house where somebody isn't in now, because everyone's indoors, so that dries up their profession.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. That's the hazard of the trade.
Exactly.
I wonder if they can get COVID relief.
Well, I was going to say, it's, COVID is good to keep burglars at bay.
Grant for burglars. Yeah.
Exactly,
the only thing is, Paul, is I mean, I love when you're on this program, because I say 3 or 4 things and you immediately say rubbish, Keith, and put everybody straight, which is great. It just shows all my prejudices coming into my stories. But I mean, if I actually went and smashed a window and the coppers caught me, can you see the headlines? TV granddad smashes car window. Whereas a lot of these youngsters they're just getting rid of their frustration with COVID.
Yeah. We'll be watching you, Keith.
I think that's the trouble. I can't move without being watched nowadays, and it's not stalking. Right, let's take a look at the weather, and then we'll come on to the things that you think are very important, Paul, for us to talk about this morning.
Right. Cool.
When you see me with an umbrella, it's raining. Well, here we are. Okay. Now, the remarkable thing is that the weather the last 3 days has been almost exactly the same. It's a bit sunnier this morning than it was yesterday, but nonetheless, scattered cloud. We can expect a wee bit, I guess. Not in sight at the moment, but it is on the way. It's not been unpleasant at all. The doomsayers at the Weather Office saying that we were going to get a hit from Siberia seem to be wrong, but I wonder if they'll be wrong when they say that we might more likely to head into Easter with a very balmy environment and a sunny Easter, which would be very, very nice to lift the spirits, particularly as some COVID restrictions will be lifted. Okay, that's me. Okay. Come along, Mr. Fowle. Can we please have your thoughts for the morning?
Okay, well, you're a joint shareholder in these arguments because we've discussed it before the programme. We're very well prepared.
You don't let anybody know.
The one that we seized on, I think, is this £5,000 fine. And now I don't know whether people have thought of the various angles. It sounds fine. This argument is about fine versus jail. The £5,000, any millionaire, any wealthy person can pay at will, do the quarantine, pay the fine, and he's out. And he's moving with a few people on a boat, say, or traveling, whatever, and he or she might be spreading the virus. So the point is, the £5,000 fine is not a deterrent. To poor people like us, Keith, it's a deterrent. I wouldn't like to pay £5,000. I wouldn't break the law. But what is happening is a multimillionaire like, say, Abramovich could pay £5,000 fines. So do you see my point? It's now what they should do is on the same model as Canada and Australia, and I've studied the policing there, is you give a warning to people. If they do move to go abroad, there's no messing about. You send them to jail. It could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Jail is the thing for this kind of crime, because what you're saying here is a multimillionaire from Britain can travel to Canada, pay when he comes back or when he gets there, he can pay whatever money it takes, and then he or she will be going through Canada spreading the virus. So I do think that this government is up against it, but they really sometimes find something which really isn't working in practice. For example, Keith, if you have plenty of money, look at you, look very wealthy. What
with this hair? Can't even afford a haircut.
Yeah. But imagine, Keith, you read that, the £5,000 fine. You think, well, okay, I've got plenty of money. I've got a nice boat. You will risk it, won't you? So what I think should be done is the £5,000 fine with the caveat of a tougher thing. Jail is really the only thing that really stops people, Keith, going to jail. And I know we can't fill the jails with lots of people, but seriously, that fine is peanuts to a wealthy person. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me this, because this is your area of expertise. If for instance, there's a £5,000 fine. If in fact you get a criminal record for that, can people actually buy their way out of getting the criminal record on their docket, as it were, or is that something that is equal to absolutely all of us?
That's a good point, Keith. I'm not sure of the actual. There's other things attached to it. All I've read is really that the fine will be imposed. I don't think if a lot of people do break it, I think it would be difficult to actually say, well, all these people have criminal records. Now, if the fact they're saying a £5,000 fine, what they should be saying is a £5,000 fine plus, if it's a serious breach, you get jail or you get a bigger fine. But a fine in itself, Keith, is only valid and only practical if the person has got money. So a fine to a millionaire of £5,000 is nothing. A fine to you and me and us other hardworking down and outs is going to be tough. So this is why I query it. I'd like people to think about that. The problem the government haven't got right is they haven't defined a fine, a regulation, and a jail sentence. In Australia and Canada, and I quote them, they just act straight away. If somebody did that in Australia, it's automatic jail, of which they would get, if it's 6 months, they'll probably serve 3 months. But the fact is, people like you and I and other decent people around do not want to go to jail. You get a real criminal record there, and it sticks with you for a long time. So I do caution people.
Are you cautioning Roman Abramovich?
Well, doesn't he run most of the world? So I really don't. I'm sure he wouldn't break the law. He wouldn't break the law.
I have to say that I've never met him. But when I go to Moscow and I stay with some friends who, they're very, very wealthy. And one morning we were having breakfast and the phone rang, and Arkady answered the phone, and there was a conversation. He said, "Yes, Roman, yes, Roman," and he finished the conversation. And I just looked at him, and he said, "That's who it was." He's mainly British now. But that's my thoughts, Keith. I'm just saying that I don't. The trouble is, the government. It's just been a splash news title. I don't know what the ins and outs is behind there must be more thinking, but it's just the tag, isn't it? £5,000 fine for going abroad illegally. Yeah. I might have a dig and see if I can find out whether it is that you do get actual criminal record. I would imagine the £5,000 fine, because it's COVID, etc., because there are sometimes redeeming reasons for this. It might be they might have taken the boat out because somebody's very ill in Spain, etc. Then they've got a backup. But the fine is the first thing you do, Keith. But it's got to be effective. And I say,
tell me this: most people with big boats are generally wealthy. Would you accept that?
Yeah.
Therefore,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Either that or they're absolutely broke.
yeah, exactly. I'm broke.
There was
I'm broken without a yacht.
yes.
That upsets me.
But you know, there is an interesting business side to what you've just said, because
Yeah.
many years ago, I had a book that gave quotes from businessmen and what happened with the ups and downs. And you know, the funny thing is, of course, is I was moaning yesterday about the average sort of person who goes into work and they work and they get a salary and they come home and they don't even think what it takes to generate the money. And when you're at the lower end of the market, small, of course, generating the cash and keeping a business afloat is a very, very difficult and tough thing.
Yeah.
It sometimes can get really, really nasty. But the fact is that we, as entrepreneurs, as it were, are always living on the edge. And the one of the it was one of the shipping magnates, Greek shipping magnates, and he said, "I was flat broke." He said, "But what I did was I would still go to all the places that I used to be seen, and I would order a gin and tonic, and I would make that gin and tonic last the entire evening, perhaps 3 or 4 hours, so that nobody would know that I was on the downslope, and people would still treat me as if I was a multimillionaire, and that's the way I got back up again." So that's an interesting example that you raised.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is, actually, entrepreneurs. It's like Maxwell. Maxwell was one of 9 children born in Ruthenia, and he had it's one of the poorest parts of the world. Now, I don't condone Maxwell, but give him some credit. He won the Military Cross in the war, and also, which is people forget that, and also he came from nothing. And the argument is, if you're a comfortable guy like me who's been to college, done all the right things, you sometimes don't have that entrepreneurial slant. I'm sure whereas if you're dragged up and you've known poverty, it's the poor people that drag themselves up and become multi-billionaires. You take Abramovich, take Maxwell. And that's the interesting thing about life. Those who come from a poor background or slums, etc., will fight to get up there. Whereas people like us are quite comfortable. So we become, I guess, a comfortable middle class.
Yeah,
and that's the argument. But yeah, Abramovich. Well, he's had his spats in his time, but he spends most of his time now in Britain running Chelsea.
yeah. And if you didn't make it work, you got the sack.
Well, that's right. But should we move on? How are we doing for time, Kit? There's 3 more topics.
Well, we're coming up. It's believe it or not. And if I may say, that one of the private chats we have, obviously, is we want Mirador to be as good as possible, but we don't want it to replicate BBC or anything. So we're quite happy for a casual approach and mistakes and so on. And you have worried a little bit about, because you're going to get your own show, is what the hell do I talk about for half an hour? Well, we haven't really got around to half the things that you want to talk about this morning. We've been on for half an hour. It's now 7:59. So you can see that when it's a good, jolly chat and there are interesting things, and we can actually put a different spin on it, the time goes very quickly. It does for us anyway. I don't know about the people watching.
Well, I think the show should be called The Babble Hour. I like that, the Babble Hour. But yeah,
well, if it was called The Bubble Hour, it would be a political show.
well, I'm sure our view, Keith, is that really it's good to be a bit more off the cuff and a bit more, because you actually look at it rather than being a straight-laced BBC. It's better to be where we challenge things. What I like to do is throw out ideas. I'm not saying I agree with what I've actually said, but it's the idea of being contentious and saying, well, here's three thoughts. What do you think? And it's engaging people. Otherwise, the BBC just speak to you. They just tell you. Whereas I think what we're trying to do, I think you as the boss have been doing this for some time, is to make people think about things that they wouldn't normally, or look at things in a different way. That's what it is.
And why would people bother to watch us if we were exactly the same as the BBC? One of the things I found is, way back in my murky past in the 70s, is I returned from Canada to help open up the independent radio sector in the UK. And those people who had won the licenses were ex-BBC people in the main, and they seemed to think that all they got to do was to replicate the BBC. And of course, nobody was watching and nobody was listening. And they had to come to a very, very, or through a big learning curve to realize that if you weren't going to offer something that was an alternative, then why would people bother? Because the BBC can do it that much better. If you're talking about that sort of thing, they've got the resources, they got the funds, they got the know-how. Let them be, and we're not offering anything. So I hope that what we do is we offer an alternative. And I'll tell you what we're going to do at the moment, Paul, is because you said that we raise a giggle. I played this the other day, and it got a lot of comment. People said, "Oh, that was very funny." So we're going to play it again, just to give us a little bit of a laugh before we go on to more serious stuff.
Okay.
Very odorous.
I think it was an angel.
Can you handle it?
Very good.
First, let's send it over to Mike Rizzo, who has a look. Oh, look at Lady Liberty.
Quite local.
Sorry. Gianna and I clearly just had a moment. How's the weather?
Oh, man. All right. Statue of Liberty this week. Oh, no. 83 degrees today. I'm so sorry.
67 in Bedford Park.
We're gonna see the temperatures in the upper 60s this morning.
A sticky situation at an airport in Tennessee after baggage was sprayed with raw sewage.
Sprayed?
I know. Well,
soil is one of those words. There's no way to say it. It just sounds like chunky moisture.
Oh.
it's the two words you hate.
Yeah.
Corn? How'd that get on my bag?
Okay, too far. Oh my gosh. Here's the deal. Just wait. This just in. We're on TV. There are people watching. We're not in a private area. Just FYI. Oh my gosh.
Well, more bodily functions in the news this morning. The next time you pass gas, make sure no police are around. A man in West Virginia faces assault charges after police say he passed gas and vandalized the officer. Wayne, don't laugh. After the man was already arrested for DUI, according to police report of St. Cruz. I can't even get through this.
He passed the gas so loudly the officer said it was, quote, very odorous and created contact of an insulting or provoking nature.
Mr. Anchorman.
See, that wasn't even right. To put that story in there was wrong. That was wrong, man.
I didn't see it when I was looking through the script. He stuck that in there.
Very odorous.
Well, it's never actually. I mean, obviously, in private life, it's happened to us all, as we say, tickle the funny bone. And if you get into a situation where you get the giggles, it doesn't matter who says what, it just makes you laugh. And to be stuck in front of a television camera where you can't control it, as indeed those poor professional broadcasters found themselves, is just something that is. I hope it never occurs to me.
Well, that's what people want. That's being human. That's exactly how it should be. As long as you weigh the serious matter with the comic, and we have a good laughs, then that's a great thing. Who wants a straight-laced news program? They want people who are, and that was a human touch, wasn't it?
Yeah,
everyone's
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I mean, the funny thing is that if somebody asked me 5 minutes after the program what those items were that they were laughing at, I couldn't tell you. What I could tell you is that they were laughing out of control, and it's very funny.
Keith, I've got some bad news for you. Actually, they've been watching Mirador. That's why they're laughing.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind if we got that reaction from people. I wouldn't mind in the least. Okay, back to the serious stuff then, because we've talked now about the fine, and you have 3 or 4 more things that you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, it leads to the serious stuff at the moment. So will government stick to the schedule? They've moved things around a bit. Boris, as soon as the government say, "Oh, it's everything's going to be fine," we've got these dates, etc. I still worry that something comes up and they move it. And my view is that if they do move the goalposts and people are taken back, I think it's going to be the population will be very suspicious, suspicious of what the government's doing, because there's going to be disappointment, depression, and mental health issues will arise because people are at the tipping point. I think we're all under stress. You and I are old veterans, but everybody gets stressed, Keith. And I think that if the government aren't precise and there's any moving goalposts, that's trouble. And so bear that one in mind, and it moves nicely onto the last 2 topics. Post-COVID, return to normality, or is it a new era? It seems to me there's clearly too much control by government at the moment. So, yeah, I think you blend the two together, Keith. You as I say, take the best of pre-COVID life and and then get on with the new era. But normality isn't going to come back, Keith, which means that we're not so much in control. And if you do have the conspiracy theory, it's quite simple to say, well, the nanny state must continue to help people because we're in a bad time. So you with me here? Because I know they don't actually mean it, but governments can actually fall into running a nanny state simply because the population actually are in a recession, have mental problems, etc. It's a tough one. Does the government? So in other words, I'm just a bit wary. I don't want the government doing a volte-face or something, a turnaround, and that's always possible, Keith. And that would damage everybody. That really would. I'll be annoyed. I've got dates in my mind. You know, the 12th, the 29th, May, June, Australia in December. I didn't say which year. So that's my point. I raised that for people to think about it, because we're not going to have normality. Normalities change every generation anyway. We'll just have to figure out we can make it a better world. That sounds a bit flowery, but that's what we've got to do. We've got to learn from this. Simple as that. Yeah.
One of the things that has alarmed me, because strangely enough, in my time, I mean, this was used in the Weimar Republic, particularly under Nazism, but also it was used by the IRA in Belfast and Londonderry. Yes. That is sort of the block Führer. In other words, somebody is appointed to keep an eye on everybody and then snitch on them. And the story the other day about a lady where the police turned up, they responded to it, is somebody who was the local neighborhood snoop saw that they were having tea together in a garden. They were socially distanced, but and immediately phoned the police and said, "Hey, these people are breaking the law," and around they raced. That to me really smacks of authoritarianism. I mean, if anybody can talk authoritatively about authoritarian regimes, is I've lived in at least 5 of them. So I know exactly what it's like. The fact that we're heading that way, and as you say, government taking away our freedoms, I think is worrying.
Well, that's right, Keith. You and I have travelled. I've seen, what you've seen. I've seen in various countries. I think the worst thing was East Germany under the Russia, because I think it was a record number of turnings in. You had mothers turning in their son. East Germany was one of the really bad quasi-communist states, and of course, but that was probably one of the worst snitching that's ever been. But in Hitler's time, to save your life, you'll snitch on your wife or your son. That's it. But I mean, we're not going to go that far. I don't think we have any chance here of having a Nazi government. But I just think again, I come back to the basic thing which you and I always discuss. History can repeat itself. Always be aware of history, and it will guide you to miss the next big catastrophe. There'll be dictatorships in the future, Keith. There'll be unfair wars, etc. We've got to kind of make the best of it. But again, I come back to the fact that human beings, we've got very short memories. That's our problem. And as I say, you and I, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, will be in a pub somewhere, and this will be just in the long distant past, because that's how it works. So I just warn people to be suspicious and don't take everything that you say. I'm not saying revolution in the streets, but people have gone through a lot. They deserve a break now.
Yeah. No, I agree. That it is easy to say it can't happen here, but
yes.
It's play up, and play the game. Good old being British and so on and so forth, which is nonsense. We've got people here who will capitalize on a situation as much as anywhere in the world. And if you actually open up the door, who knows who's going to slip in? And that's always, to me, every time that you infringe upon a freedom or something that is, I mean, the way that we actually understand democracy is far from a democratic process, really. But as Churchill said, it's the best that we've got.
That's right.
And if we've got it, let's not wash it away. Sorry,
No.
That sounded terribly serious from me. Right, carry on.
No, it's good. No, it's good. Just looking at you, Keith, has taken my mind off it. Right. Okay. What I'm going to say now is just I like to be thought provoking. Everyone, if you go abroad, everyone admires the English, how very strong we are, how our institutions are very good, how we have democracy, as you say, inverted commas. But as I've learned, having been a policeman and a banker and other things, is actually we do corruption in a more subtle way. There's a lot of corruption in Britain, but the world, if you ask anyone around the world, I've been to Russia, I've been to Thailand, everywhere, we English are actually liked. I know it sounds crazy, but we are actually liked. But we've got to sort our own house in order, because we keep it under wraps. America's corruption is very much in your face. You have the mafia over there. What we do corruption in a subtle way, where as we've said, and we've spoken to our friends as well, Keith, Britain, there's something rotten in Britain and it needs to be overhauled. Now, Boris has touched upon that, saying it needs a complete overhaul. We do need a complete overhaul, because in the hallowed halls of councils, of government departments, of parliament, we don't know what's going on. And as we discussed, and I hope people don't take this badly, we are a very apathetic nation. So, and as I think I think it was Napoleon said, the British are very slow to anger, but by God, when they get angry, they're angry. And I think we're in this. I think it's probably the most important thing I could say today, Keith, is that's what we've got to watch, our internal corruption. Things aren't brilliant in Britain. We've suffered, but there's some insidious things which I saw in some past life, and I think we've got to address that. There's no doubt. The establishment. What is it? Who is it? Why? And I think I hope people can address that, not in a nasty way, but I'm not taking sides here, but Boris has touched upon that and said that we do need to reform things. But will it happen, Keith? But yeah, I think we do corruption as much as anybody else, but ours is a bit more subtle, a bit more British.
Yes, I agree. Paul, it is 14 minutes past 8, would you believe? So I think we'd better just take a moment to look at the people who make us tick.
I'm just going for rum and coke.
When you've missed the train, don't despair. have a nice cup of coffee. And perhaps a mince pie. At the runaway on Lewes Station. After that, why worry about the next train? The runaway on Lewes Station. Relaxation beyond compare.
Hello, Keith. Hello, Keith.
Yes, the computer, and I'm always on about computers, because halfway through that it started off and you couldn't hear the sound. And the computer said, "You stupid idiot, you've hit a button that's taken the sound." And it was me. I did something. I haven't a clue what I did. And the computer, God bless it, seems to have cleared it.
Keith, have you thought of taking up another job?
I think I might have to. The computers are going to get the best.
By the way, I must. Well, yeah, I must take you to task. On the video, can you please take away the picture of the Brewers pub, because I salivate when I see it come up. So can you just remove the Brewers? It's hurting.
Now, if there's one thing that I'm never going to do, is I'm never going to remove the Brewers from anything. It's a great pub. It's a lovely pub.
It is.
Yeah, family-owned pub, family-run pub, and they do a marvelous job there. But it's sad because, I mean, here is where a man of principle, Kevin, who is the owner and landlord, or at least he's passed it on to his family, to Kathy and Liam now. But they said at the lockdown, we're not going to go half measure. We are a pub. We're a drinking place. People come here to socialize, and there's no sense in us opening up and having people sit at tables and feel miserable. And I really do admire them for doing that. They stuck by their principles, and let's hope that the loyalty which they've shown to their customers is replicated when it comes back to pubs being open again. Anyway, on to more serious things, because we've got another couple of points yet.
Well, yeah. So again, the nanny state, but on the corruption thing, Keith, I you can agree or not agree with me. I just think we ought to have a look at things like that, because too much is being masked. Too many skeletons have been put in various cupboards, Keith.
Yeah.
And I think we should look at ourselves before we start criticising, Russia, China, any other difficult countries. We should look at ourselves. We're playing a holier than thou. But as I say, from my police days, from my banking days, where it is dog eat dog in the city, things go on which I don't approve of, and we've got to address these things.
Well, it's a culture thing as well, Paul. I was in Romania training journalists how to spot corruption, and one of the things that you could hear from the general public was, well, those people in government, and they, and they get their cars and so on and so forth. And you would say to them, "Do you have a driving license?" "Yes." "Did you take a driving test?" "No." "How did you get your license?" "Well, we paid a couple of euros to the man who." Is that corruption? And they would suddenly start thinking, "Oh, hang on. This is endemic in our society. When it suits us, we can be corrupt. And when it doesn't suit us, we can point the finger." And I think sometimes that we don't look at things that way here, is we can all be corrupt. And if we're going to stop corruption at the top, we've got to stop it at the bottom.
Well, Keith, if you give me a tenner, I won't appear for two weeks. Okay, is that all right? I can go and spend it. I can spend it at the Brewers.
Listen, if you didn't appear, I think people would think, what happened to my conscience? And they wouldn't believe a word that I said. So anyway, you've got another couple of points, or at least one more point to bring to our attention.
Well, I've led up to, we started with the fine, and now we're leading up to the key one. I think the primary concern now, the budgets address the economy to an extent, okay, good or bad, people will argue about that. So we had the budget, we've had the vaccinations, we've had things are getting better, pubs are opening. But one thing now is we must address mental health. Without giving names, I've had a very good friend of mine ringing up who runs a very successful business, lives in London, and he sounded on the verge of insanity. And this is a very well-respected guy. And I don't think, we're all tough, Keith, to a certain extent. God, our parents went through a war, which was far more. But I don't think mental health comes in various forms. I've seen it in the police where you've arrested somebody who's acts absolutely crazy, but it isn't. They're going through a very bad patch. They're going through. So the point is, we've got, what is mental health is the first definition, and I think they've got to spend money on it, because I'm sure people, you, I, Alex, our friend, we wouldn't. If we were told we had mental health problems, we wouldn't accept it, would we? But it's because of that you actually. It's diagnosed. So the point is, Keith, I'm trying to make is that there must be a huge mental health problem, and I don't know the definition exactly right, but I think that's the primary concern. We've got most things done now. Travel is, of course, important because people are going bonkers, and travel might help ease the mental health thing. So I think that's the next one to address, because I'm sure it's doubled or more, Keith. Certainly suicides have gone up. Certainly domestic disputes have gone up, naturally. So we've got to address these things, because that's the fundamentals of society. And, Boris has raised it a bit, but what are we going to do about that? So I think they've covered everything so far. We're back to drinking in pubs, which is everyone's main concern. But I really think the mental health, I think some people don't realise they've got it. That's the speaking thing about it.
You actually raise a very good point, Paul, because most people, as you well know, and you joke a little bit about it, but it's true. Most people think I'm completely and utterly insane. I'm mad.
Yes,
and I probably am. And the reason that we've got a television station here is because I am mad enough to think that it can work, and I've hammered at it for years and beaten my brains out. But I got no help whatsoever, or Mirador got no help whatsoever. Maybe it's going to change just towards the end, but we've gone a year keeping this station going without any help from anywhere. And I started to get very resentful of this. And what happens is that when the government now can say something quite innocuous, and I go off. Boom! So I think that if the definition of mental health is that you are affected in a different way to the way you would have been under normal circumstances, is a lot of us have got mental health problems. But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with me ranting and raving and so on and so forth? I mean, actually, most people are very sensible. They just ignore me. But but the fact of the matter is,
who are you?
I've got a problem.
What's your name? Who are you?
I'm not giving you my name. You might stop me.
But you think about it, Keith. Going back remember the loony bins? When we were young, it's look at the loony bins. Yeah. I think mental health. Everyone imagines somebody in a straitjacket or bonkers. That isn't mental health.
No.
Mental health comes in various forms, and I think that the busy businessman, the housewife that has suppressed telling her kids things, all these things, it's depression. It's a lot of it's depression, Keith, but it's got to be addressed because lockdown has affected everybody.
Yeah.
Look at me.
Domestic abuse is shut up under lockdown. And I mean, that really is a form of mental health, isn't it?
Yeah,
mental illness.
I think so. So lump it all together, yeah. But that's serious, you know.
I would like you to think, Paul, because you're soon, right after Easter, we haven't decided on a name for it yet, but Paul will have his own half hour to discuss things about business, whether it be local, national, international, or whatever, that will affect our daily lives. But one of the things that astonished me, because I had an issue over mental health, with the local council, and I wondered how much money we spend as a nation. You know, it is £12.2 billion that we spend on mental health.
Is that right?
12.2 billion. Now, where the hell is that going?
The pub.
Yeah.
No, that's staggering, Keith. That is staggering. I suppose 80 million people.
Yeah. They found a double.
But I think stir crazy is a great term, Keith. I love the film, and stir crazy is really probably what we've all been through. And some handle it well, some don't. But it's been tough for everybody, Keith, and I admire, especially people with a lot of children, and that's. And we've got, as you say, the NHS. We must reward. That's the one thing out of this program. I'm biased because I've got family in the NHS, but I think they deserve every increase. But will they get it? I doubt it.
Yeah, well, I doubt it too. But then again, as you rightly pointed out, is they do have to balance the budget. The only thing is that I think that there are things. I find the question of overseas aid very controversial. Yes. I am not against overseas aid. Once again, it's like the EU. It's the way it's applied. I mean, having spent probably from 2000, well, earlier than that, but let's say 2000 to 2013 or 2014, involved various levels about overseas and trying to help, is I realize the people that we choose, a system is at fault, the people that we choose that end up running these programs abroad are not fit for purpose. And once again, it's the waste of money. It's not that we actually apportion that amount of money, but if we're going to waste it, let's waste it at home.
Well, there's that. That's good, Keith. Charity begins at home is very true. It sounds selfish. How I've managed to square the circle is that I've given personal donations to causes which I value. So if we all did what you do, what I do, and give little, it means the government wouldn't have to spend so much money in overseas aid. So what the idea of overseas aid is that we as a sophisticated, civilized country should pass on and help less fortunate countries, correct? That is the basis of it. So on that basis, British public are fantastic in giving. Personally, my choice has been I've doubled the amount I give to the charities that I sponsor. I've doubled it. So that means that means that I'm probably covering a bit of the aid that the government aren't giving. You with me? So if all of us do that, it'll still. And I think the British people are generous. We're very generous. Every major disaster, we've done great things. So we should give ourselves a pat on the back. But also, as I say, personally, I like to give to. I check the charity out. I have a look at it. I used to work for the Prince's Trust for 10 years, as you know. So I know a bit about charity, and that's how I do it, Keith. It means that because my conscience is salved, But and if the government do cut back,
well, I'm glad that we're ending this program because, believe it or not, Paul, it is 8:30 and we've got to go. And I'm glad that you're feeling generous because at lunchtime, mine is a pint. So we'll see everybody tomorrow, and next week is another week. We head up towards the Easter break, and after the Easter break, we hope that there will be the same Mirador, but with a lot of different features and a lot of exciting things. So for the moment, toodle pip.
Okay.